no show of hands, because we're in Sunday school, and I think there's probably going to be some pressure for everybody to raise their hand, but just in your own mind, really and truly, and just you yourself and nobody else other than God, how many of us really want to be a servant? How many of us, we all grew up wanting to do different things. A butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. People wanted to be different things. But how many kids today are sitting there, you know what I want to be? I want to be a servant. It's not really a popular concept. If we're honest with ourselves, we sometimes want to be served rather than to serve, and yet that is diametrically opposite of what Jesus taught us. During this time of year, really in Passion Week, if you will, John the 13th chapter, Jesus is instituting the Lord's Supper, which some of us celebrated already, some of us will in the next service, but and Jesus has just washed the disciples' feet. Somebody read John 13:12-6 for us.
When Jesus had washed their feet and put on his outer clothing, he reclined again and said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord. You are speaking rightly, since this is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done for you. Truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, and a messenger is not greater than the one who sent him."
Those are easy words to read. They're easy words to believe intellectually. But sometimes they're difficult words to put into force and effect. People walked around barefooted. People walked around in sandals. Their feet got dirty. Their feet got nasty. And Jesus, the Son of God, humbles himself and washes his disciples' feet as they're reclining. I think most people know this, but Leonardo da Vinci may have been a great artist. He wasn't really an accurate historian or theologian. We see the painting of the Last Supper, and you see a bunch of Renaissance Italian guys sitting around a table. That's not the way it was at all. What would have been happening in first century Jewish culture is these folks would have been reclining, literally laying down. If I was younger and more limber, I'd demonstrate for you. I could still get down. It's the getting up part that bothered me a little bit. But they would be laying on their side, basically. They would be leaning on their left arm, and they'd be using their right arm to eat. So their feet were stuck out. That's the point. So Jesus went around and washed all these feet. Foot washing isn't a glorious job. It would be a job for a lowly servant, and yet that's what Jesus did, and he tells us that is the attitude we should have in ourselves. One of the questions that comes from the materials, and I think it's a good question, is what might making yourself a servant to all in order to win more people look like in today's culture? We don't wash a lot of feet, maybe at the pedicure spot, but what would be an example today of how we could be a servant to all?
Good example yesterday. Okay. Anybody walk into church today and notice it looks a little bit cleaner? Bunch of men out here, women, probably kids, a lot of folks, took the time and served by cleaning up the church.
Not a high-profile position, not one where you're going to get a lot of accolades, not one where somebody can say, "Oh man, look at him, he's the best bush trimmer at First Baptist Ocala." And yet it had to be done.
Who wants to be a servant? And I think it's a matter of choice. Who wants to be a slave? You have no choice as a slave. But we all want to be servants, as Christ calls us to do what we can. And I think Christ portrays the perfect example. It's personal sacrifice. It's doing for others for things that they may not be able to do for themselves. And I'm in a business, you're in a business where we serve. We get gratification for doing what we do, personal gratification, but a lot of joy because we're meeting a need that most people can't meet on their own. That's service.
It's a good example. What's another one? What's another example of how we can be a servant today?
Teach a Sunday school class.
Teaching.
Work in the nursery.
Working in a nursery. I'm even going to use that, maybe if you don't mind, focus on that. Because teaching a Sunday school class, that's a position maybe kind of a lot of us would like to have. It's just an enjoyable position. When I teach this class or when I teach other classes around the several county area, or when I preach, I guarantee you I get more out of that than anybody does. But when you work in a nursery, that's up there, that's maybe next to bad to foot washing. That's one of those positions, kind of like trimming bushes. There's no glory, there's really nothing in it for you, and yet it's service that allows a mom, maybe who doesn't know Christ, maybe coming to church for the first time, has an issue with child care, the fact that she has a safe place for her children to be, gets to hear the gospel. That's an excellent example.
Nursing is servanthood. Nursing.
Absolutely it is. And different levels of nursing, some of the people, and not just being an RN, CNAs, people that have just a difficult position, and yet, not to pick at it too much, but those people are, most of them getting paid. What about those of us who would just help somebody just because we want to help them? Now you really get into it. There was a lady in Crystal River that died a couple of weeks ago. This is just popping out. I didn't mean to say it, but I actually had to sing in a quartet for her funeral. The lesson you want to learn from that is don't ever make somebody a promise if you really don't want to keep it. But there was another lady. This lady was blind from birth. Obviously couldn't drive. Duh. And there was a lady in church who drove her everywhere. And as we got to know them and talk to this Susan is the lady's name who did the driving, we assumed they were sisters or there was something. No relation. Just met her in church and saw that she had a need, and she drove her all over Citrus County for multiple years. How about that for being a servant?
Yeah.
What